end of a Shitano show, Kaneda riding his red bike, Shinji and Asuka lying down in front of that orange sea, the Titan eating Eren's mother. What all of these moments have in common is that they became iconic parts of the history of the medium, either because they are scenes which are referred throughout the world to this day, or because they represent important moments in the history of anime, and depending on who you ask, there are hundreds of moments that can be seen as iconic from different points of view, from the scene of making of a cyborg in Ghost in the Shell for its great artistic value, to the fight of Rengoku against Akasa for being the most spectacular moment of the highest grossing film of the medium. But I think that there's one iconic moment that we cannot forget. I firmly believe that God Knows is one of the most iconic scenes of the medium and deserves the same respect as any of the other ones I named before. But first, let's give some context. Let's talk about the phenomenon that was Haruhi Suzumiya, and it's really difficult to explain how popular this anime actually is. No, it's really hard. We know that the novels are the top 5 best-selling light novels of the world, but that doesn't mean that the anime is also popular. I wish that putting up 2040p videos of people dancing the ending would be enough for citing Wikipedia, but it's not. You know, you want numbers? Here you have them. Those are some big numbers. But I'm not choosing to talk about God Knows just because of its popularity. In the anime we have things that maybe are just as well known like Endless Eight, and numbers aren't everything. If we talk about artistic value, the film is usually regarded as the highest point of the series in this aspect. I'm choosing God Knows because I think that it shows very well what this anime represents, and it also shows us many of the trends that we are going to see in the future of the industry. First of all, Haruhi is an special adaptation since it was the work that made Kadokawa enter the anime industry with its media mix model, popularizing the adaptations of light novels. Yeah, I know. A lot of words together that we don't know what they mean, but in short, Kadokawa is a Japanese book publisher which by 1970 began to experiment with the idea of producing movies and in consequence soundtracks for their novels. Of course, this is not the first time that this has been done, but the difference is that Kadokawa focused on promoting the movies with the fame of the novels and vice versa, making a kind of synergy effect in which the popularity of both works fed each other. This mix of media was given many names until the name Media Mix was chosen, and it was really similar to the anime system of manga, anime and merchandising, and for Kadokawa this media mix system resulted in successes such as
犬神家の一族
but it also generated flops, and by the end of the 80s the benefits promised by this model did not arrive. But on the other hand, the sector that was generating money was a smaller company associated with Kadokawa called Kadokawa Media Office, which focused specifically on manga anime magazines and also had its media mix projects. But instead of real image movies, this sub-company of Kadokawa published in 1988 what's considered the first light novel, Record of the Lodoss World, and in 1990, this same company produced the anime, introducing Kadokawa and its media mix model to the anime medium. And well, to keep it shorter, in 1993 the CEO of Kadokawa was arrested for drug trafficking, and his brother, who was the head of the sub-company that focused specifically on otaku media, became the CEO of all Kadokawa. But it's not until 2006 that we see Kadokawa producing the anime of one of their novels, and that anime was Haruhi, which started a wave of light novels adaptations that doesn't stop. If we look at the best-selling light novels in the world, Kadokawa occupies 5 places in the top 15, leading with Haruhi, and the company is in charge of producing the animes of those novels. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. In 2020, Kadokawa said that they aim to produce 40 anime, and among those 40 animes are their novels. This season, they are producing
勇者やめます。乙女ゲーム世界はモブに厳しい世界です。史上最強の大魔王、村人アに転生する。
which are all anime of novels published by them, and it all started with Haruhi Suzumiya. But Haruhi did not only introduce the media mix model, it also changed it. Let's use an example. Most of you surely heard of Isekai Quartet. It is an anime in which basically Kadokawa puts the characters of their most popular isekais in a school. We can see the characters of Re:Zero, Overlord, Saga of Tanya the Evil, and Konosuba. And the existence of this anime is really interesting because it shows how the media mix has changed. One criticism that Otsuka Eishi had about Kadokawa media mix model was the iteration, or in other words, the repetition. The movie told the same story as the novel, and the soundtrack is the same that you can hear in the movie. Basically, the approach was that of a single word which was readapted into other mediums. Eishi argued that if the companies didn't create content that diverged from the original, that place will be taken by fans, turning the balance around and changing the consumer society forever. Of course this didn't happen, but we start to see that as more works were adapted to different mediums, they changed, and the idea of creating a world tied to a single big narrative out of which all of these little narratives come out stopped being the focus, and they start to produce works which focus on the one thing that remains constant and ties all of the different versions of the work together: the characters. No matter how different the world is in each medium, the characters, the concept of the characters, remain the same. Kadokawa stopped selling you the world of the characters and started selling you the characters themselves. From that idea, things like Isekai Quartet are born, an anime in which all of the characters are taken out of the world and narratives of their original works to focus on interactions in between them, and the anime in which Kadokawa began to change the focus is nothing more and nothing less than the melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, and it's not done in a very subtle way. It literally says it on the opening. They are trying to sell you Haruhi. They are trying to sell you Haruhiism. It doesn't matter what happens to the world. It's even told us in the anime that the world in which the characters are can be destroyed and recreated at any time, but Haruhi will still be there. The focus of the work is clear. The important thing is to follow the characters in their day-to-day lives and get attached to Haruhi and the rest of the characters as we follow their quest for supernatural beings. There is no focus on a great narrative to follow, and throughout this video I use the word narrative, specifically in the context of the term grand narrative, so I guess it's time to talk about the controversial book Database Animals. What? I don't have the book physically, okay? Books are expensive. Database Animals is a book in which Hiroki Azuma proposed two ways to consume anime. The first way is the one I have already mentioned, which was originally thought by Otsuka Eishi, and it's called word consumption, in which at the moment of consuming a work there is always a consistent vision of the world or a great narrative which is expressed to the spectator through small narratives, which can be, for example, a chapter of an anime or a figure, and it's only throughout the consumption of these small narratives that the spectator can manage to understand the vision of the world or the grand narrative proposed by the work. According to Hiroki, this way of consuming works was the most present among the first two generations of otaku born in the 60s and 70s, who grew up watching works as Space Battleship Yamato and Gundam, while for the third generation of otaku born in the 80s who grew up with Evangelion, the form of consumption changed from a narrative consumption to a database consumption, in which the viewer, instead of searching for these grand narratives to consume, start to consume moe characteristics. Now, when the Western anime fan hears the word moe, we usually think of an artistic style, but Hiroki Azuma refers to interpretation more shared by the Japanese otaku that describes moe as a feeling of affection towards a character, and this otaku began to characterize characteristics in the characters that generate in them this feeling of moe and began to create a kind of database with all these characteristics, and if you're here you surely know them: cat ears, big eyes, maid uniforms, and the famous hair in the form of an antenna are some of the most famous, and you also have the personalities, which can vary from certain attitudes such as clumsiness or shyness to full personalities that are usually classified as deres, you know, tsundere, kudere, yandere, and even certain situations can be part of the database, such as the change of calling the character by his first name instead of their last name, or stop using honorifics, which is called
呼び捨てモーメント
or the classic of the protagonist entering the room where a girl is changing, which is called
Learn to knock moment.
All of these characteristics or settings are stored as information in a kind of database throughout which otaku start to consume and understand the medium, and in consequence, it also ended up being a way to produce it. Eventually, those otaku that grew up with the database start to become part of the industry and create their own anime, or even the creators themselves in the 90s were already part of the group that contributed to the creation and consumption of the database. For example, it's no mystery that Hideaki Anno is an otaku in every sense of the word, and once this third generation of otaku started to create their own anime, they start to use features from the database and apply them to their works, resulting in characters and situations that, more than being 100% original, are to a certain extent an agglomeration of moe characteristics. To give examples, a genre that use a lot of database elements is the harem, in which we usually follow an average Japanese boy which by random situations end up with a group of girls fighting for his love throughout beach episodes, festivals, and school plays. But the important thing about these girls is the
萌えよ萌え、いわゆる一つの萌え要素。基本的にね、何かおかしな事件が起こるような物語にはこういう萌えでロリっぽいキャラが一人はいるものなのよ。
all of Haruhi can be boiled down to this girl who is looking for characters straight out of the database. We have the average Japanese boy with a cynic outlook on life, a cute and sweet but awkward girl, a mysterious exchange student, and a shy and quiet girl with blue hair and pale skin. Haruhi is an anime by otakus for otakus, created from the database for consumers of the database, and also is one of the animes who led the medium to adapt more light novels of this style with its popularity. Now, I'm not going to say that the Haruhi anime was the first anime to use elements from the database, just as it was not the first media mix anime project from Kadokawa, but I think that it was the one that started the wave of light novels adaptations which not only make use of the moe characteristics but also are self-aware about it, and use that self-awareness as part of the series. There are animes like Monogatari, Oreimo, Snafu, Saekano, and who knows how more, which I think that in one way or another owe their existence to Haruhi. And I think that the scene that represents all of these ideas within Haruhi the best is God Knows. In these scenes there are a lot of elements that are taken directly from the database. We have things like the bunny girl costume, which is an element that is in the medium since the 80s with things like the comfort animation Ikoku, and is present in modern anime. And also there is the setting, having the climax being the school festival, more precisely during a play or recital for which the characters prepared, is a super common setting. But that's not really what's happening here. It is not as if this was what Haruhi's characters were preparing for in the episodes leading to this moment. The climax was supposed to be the movie, but instead that feeling of climax or key moment is stolen by the recital, which is not a conclusion or a development derived from the totality of small narratives that were presented to us. It's just something totally random in which the objective is clear. We are put in the shoes of the spectators who are only here for one thing, to reverence Haruhi. This is not a moment in which we see a character that evolved throughout the anime and is showing us everything she learned. What happened in the world of Haruhi is not relevant. In fact, initially we are not even given an explanation for why she is singing. The only thing that matters is that she's doing it, and that we are going to enjoy it. And before ending, I would like to thank Dazai for editing the video and my Patreons that helped me pay him. If you want to support the channel, you can help me donating to the Patreon that's down below. And that's everything for today's video. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.